It started with a kiss. Not a passionate one, not even a long one. Just the kind of soft, routine peck you'd exchange in passing after breakfast, on your way to work. The kind we'd shared 1,000 times in the 9 years we'd been married. But this one was off. I couldn't explain why. Her lips tasted the same, maybe a little sweeter, like she'd just sipped some juice. Her hand still brushed my shoulder in that familiar absent-minded way. But the connection, the energy, was missing. It felt like shaking hands with someone in a dream, surreal and weightless. A small thing, sure, but enough to plant the first seed of doubt. I told myself it was nothing. Probably work stress. Claire had been grinding hard lately at her new firm, long nights, tight deadlines. I chalked it up to exhaustion. But the next morning, I noticed she skipped her usual eggs and toast and poured herself a bowl of granola. I raised an eyebrow. Claire hated granola. Since when do you like that? I asked, genuinely curious. She glanced up from her phone, smiled absent-mindedly. Just felt like something light today. That should have been the end of it. People change. Tastes evolve. I've grown to enjoy kale somehow. But a few days later, we were watching a rerun of The Office, our go-to-comfort show, and Claire let out a laugh that stopped me cold. It wasn't her laugh. Not hers. Not the chuckle that curled at the edges like a private joke. This laugh was slightly higher, more nasal, almost flirtatious. She did it again 20 minutes later, covering her mouth with the back of her hand like a schoolgirl. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her, letting the smile on my face do the lying. That night, I made love to her with more urgency than I had in weeks. Something primal took over. She responded, more enthusiastically than I expected. Her fingers dug into my shoulders. Her breathing grew ragged. But even in the middle of it, something didn't feel right. Her rhythm was different. Her moans, God help me, were unfamiliar. It felt like she was impersonating herself. I lay awake for hours afterward, watching the moonlight stripe our ceiling, trying to convince myself I was just imagining things. Paranoia, maybe. Insecurity. We've all seen too many movies. Maybe I'd just become one of those husbands, reading into every breath like a detective with nothing better to do. But small things kept stacking up like bricks. Her scent changed. Not her perfume, her scent. I know that sounds insane, but I could swear that after her showers, she didn't smell the same. Like she was using a different body wash. Not floral and soft like usual, but sharper, a little more citrusy. When I asked, she told me they had a new one at the office gym. Claire never used the office gym. Then there were the texts, constant and quiet. She used to leave her phone face up on the kitchen island, scroll through Instagram while cooking. Now it was always face down, screen dark. If it buzzed, she barely glanced at it before putting it back in her pocket. I started watching her closer. How she carried herself. How she moved. It was subtle, but undeniable. She swayed her hips more, like her center of gravity had shifted. She licked her lips when speaking, especially when she was nervous or distracted. And her wardrobe, it didn't change all at once. But I began seeing skirts she hadn't worn in years, tighter tops, heels just a little higher than she normally tolerated for a full day at work. Was I losing my mind? I wanted to ask her outright, but what would I even say? Hey honey, have you been acting like a different version of yourself lately? Instead, I tried to reconnect. I planned a surprise dinner at the little French bistro she used to love. The one with candles and wine bottles and soft jazz on loop. She smiled when I told her. That's sweet, babe, she said, leaning in to kiss me on the cheek. But I already promised Hannah we'd go to that art exhibit downtown. I froze. Hannah's still in Europe, remember? Claire blinked. Just for a split second. Oh, right, she said with a tight laugh. I meant Melissa. God, I'm losing track of everyone. Her laugh again, wrong, higher pitched. A poor imitation of Claire's real one. The hairs on my arms stood on end. I watched her walk away that night, heels tapping lightly on the floor, her shoulders slightly hunched like she was trying not to give anything away. And for the first time in our marriage, I realized something that chilled me to my core. I didn't know who I was watching. I tried to shake the feeling. I did. I told myself it was my own anxiety projecting shadows where there were none. But even my dog, Max, seemed confused. Normally, he leapt into Claire's lap the second she sat down. Now, he sniffed at her hands like she was a stranger, tilted his head, backed away. That's when I knew, deep down, beneath all the rationalizing and denial, that something fundamental had shifted in our marriage. It wasn't just that Claire was changing. It was that I didn't know who she was anymore. And somehow, that terrified me more than if she'd outright confessed to cheating. Because this wasn't about a betrayal yet. This was about the feeling, dark and unshakable, that the woman I kissed goodnight wasn't the same one who woke up beside me the next morning. And maybe hadn't been for a while. She arrived on a Thursday afternoon, just as the rain began to tap on the kitchen windows. Claire had spent the morning in her robe, sipping green tea and flipping through an architectural magazine she hadn't touched in years. I was working from the breakfast nook, pretending to review spreadsheets while watching her from behind my laptop. She seemed unusually still, her movements more deliberate, like she was hyper-aware of every gesture. Her robe slipped down her shoulder once, and she didn't fix it right away. That wasn't like Claire. She hated feeling exposed. Then the doorbell rang. Claire looked up and smiled in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. Genuine, radiant, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. That smile wasn't for me. "It's her," she said, her eyes lighting up. "Hannah's back." I hadn't seen Hannah in nearly a year. Her month-long trip through Europe had stretched into 5. Rome, Paris, Prague, Lisbon. Each city documented through perfect Instagram posts, always in golden hour light, always captioned with cryptic musings about life and discovery. It was classic Hannah, elusive, magnetic, a little dangerous. I stood as Claire opened the door, and there she was. Hannah. Identical to Claire in every outward way. Same honey-brown hair cascading in loose waves, same pale green eyes, same soft lips and sculpted cheekbones. But the similarities stopped at the skin. Hannah carried herself like she didn't give a damn what anyone thought. Where Claire moved with grace and caution, Hannah walked like she owned the floor beneath her feet. She squealed and threw her arms around Claire, and they twirled together in the foyer like little girls playing dress-up. I watched, stunned for a moment by the symmetry. It felt like watching a mirror bend and shatter, one reflection dancing with the other. Then Hannah turned to me. "Oh my God," she said, breathless and beaming. "Still handsome, I see." I chuckled, stepping forward for a polite hug. Her perfume hit me immediately, something richer than Claire's usual scent, musky and floral with a bite of spice. She hugged tighter than I expected, her body pressing against mine for a beat too long. "It's good to see you, Hannah," I said, my voice caught somewhere between friendly and formal. "You too," she murmured, pulling back. "God, I miss this place." "And you too." She lingered on "you too," her eyes catching mine briefly before flicking back to Claire. The three of us moved to the kitchen. I poured wine, Claire's favorite Pinot, or at least it used to be, and watched them talk over each other in a flurry of giggles and updates. "Remember that guy in Milan?" Hannah said. "The one who thought I was you and asked me if I still design museums?" I let him buy me dinner before I told him I was the cooler twin. Claire rolled her eyes but smiled. "You probably told him I was the boring one too." "You said it, not me." Their dynamic was magnetic. Two halves of one soul, weaving in and out of each other's sentences like it was second nature. But watching them now, something twisted in my gut. It was the way Hannah looked at me when Claire wasn't watching. Her eyes would linger just a moment too long. When I laughed, she smiled like I was a secret only she knew. And once, while leaning over the counter, she accidentally brushed my hand. Just once. But it didn't feel like an accident. That night, they stayed up late watching an old rom-com in the living room, wine glasses clinking and soft laughter echoing down the hall. I excused myself to bed around 11, but I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark, listening to the murmur of their voices, the occasional squeal or burst of giggles, the rustling of throw pillows being rearranged. When Claire finally came to bed, I was half asleep. She slipped under the sheets, warm from wine and laughter, and pressed her body to mine. Her hand slid across my chest. It was slow, purposeful, her touch feather-light. "I missed you," she whispered. It was the first time in weeks she'd initiated anything. I turned toward her and kissed her deeply. Her lips tasted like red berries and something more, something foreign. She moaned softly into my mouth, her hips shifting against me. I responded instinctively, hands exploring familiar curves. But something in the way she kissed back felt unfamiliar. Not bad, just not Claire. When I woke the next morning, she was already gone from the bed. Downstairs, the twins were making pancakes. I could hear them laughing again, their voices overlapping like wind chimes in a storm. I patted down in my robe and stopped at the threshold. They were in matching pajamas. The same cut, same color, soft lavender cotton with tiny white stars. Hannah flipped a pancake with practiced ease, her back to me, and for a second, I couldn't tell which one she was. Morning, sleepyhead, they said in unison when I walked in. I blinked. Which one of you is making the pancakes? Claire laughed, pouring syrup into a porcelain dish. We should make you guess. Please don't, I said, forcing a smile. They grinned at each other, amused by their little game. But I wasn't. For the rest of the day, they were inseparable. Shopping, wine tasting, lounging in the sunroom. At one point, I passed by the guest bedroom and noticed the door slightly ajar. Inside, Hannah stood in front of the mirror in her bra and jeans, trying on a blouse, Claire's blouse. She caught me watching. Instead of covering up, she held my gaze in the mirror and slowly buttoned it. You like this one? She asked, her voice soft, playful. It's nice, I said, clearing my throat. Looks better on Claire. She smiled. Not everything has to be different. I turned and walked away, my heart pounding like I'd just sprinted up a hill. I didn't know what the hell was happening. I didn't know if I was imagining it. But a line had been crossed. Or blurred. Or maybe erased entirely. That night, Claire came to bed late again. She smelled like wine, lavender lotion, and something else. Something that smelled like Hannah. When she kissed me, I didn't kiss back right away, because I wasn't entirely sure it was her. It happened during Sunday dinner. Claire had insisted on hosting, her way of celebrating Hannah's return. She cooked all afternoon, dragging me along for errands, slicing eggplants and laying out wine glasses like we were preparing for royalty. It felt good, domestic, even a little nostalgic. For a moment, I started to believe things were returning to normal. We lit candles and opened a bottle of Chianti. The table was set with real linen napkins and the good plates we only used twice a year. Hannah came down just before dinner in a deep burgundy dress, form-fitting, sleeveless, the kind Claire would never wear around family. It was the kind of dress that made you pause. Too much? She asked, twirling with mock innocence. Claire laughed, already 2 glasses in. You're in our house, not a Milan runway. Hannah winked. Guilty as charged. We sat down, and conversation flowed like the wine. At first, it was light. Europe stories, childhood memories, shared jokes I didn't understand. I smiled through most of it, but every time I tried to make eye contact with Claire, she was already looking at Hannah, like they were in their own little world, and I was just extra. About halfway through the meal, Claire got up to fetch more wine. Hannah leaned across the table, brushing her hand against mine as she reached for the bread. Her fingers lingered. It wasn't accidental. I looked at her sharply, and she smiled, a slow, secret smile, like she was testing the water and watching for ripples. I pulled my hand back. You okay? She asked, eyes locked on mine. Yeah, I said, keeping my voice low. You just surprised me. She tilted her head slightly, studying me with amusement, like she knew something I didn't. Like she always had. And for a moment, I saw Claire in her. Or maybe I saw Hannah in Claire. I couldn't tell anymore. When Claire returned, Hannah was already leaning back, sipping her wine like nothing happened. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the touch of her hand, the flicker in her eyes, the faint scent of her perfume, which, if I was being honest, I had smelled on Claire more than once over the past week. I couldn't help it. I started comparing everything. How Claire had kissed me that night on the couch. How her body responded when we made love on Thursday. The rhythm of her breathing. The curve of her back. Could it have been? No. That was crazy. Or was it? The next morning, I came down early to grab coffee and head into work. The sun was just breaking through the trees. The kitchen was quiet, except for soft footsteps behind me. Morning. A voice said, husky from sleep. I turned. Hannah. She was wearing Claire's robe. The pale pink one with the satin tie. Her hair was tousled, her face bare. She poured herself a cup of coffee like she lived there. You're up early, I said. So are you. She took a sip and smiled over the rim. Couldn't sleep. I nodded, unsure whether to stay or leave. You know, she said after a pause, when we were kids, Claire used to copy me. People think she's the leader between us, but really, she's always been more cautious. Careful. I was the one who did the daring stuff. She just wore the mask better. She walked closer, her bare feet silent on the tile. Even now, I think she still tries to be me sometimes. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? Her smile was enigmatic. Just that sometimes, I think Claire forgets who she really is. Who we really are. I mean, don't you ever get us confused? My breath caught. What kind of question is that? She shrugged. A fair one. Before I could answer, Claire appeared in the doorway. She was in yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a sloppy bun. No makeup. Her eyes darted from me to her sister, then back. Did I miss something? She asked, a little too lightly. Just coffee, Hannah said, breezing past her. Claire watched her go, then looked at me. What did she say to you? I hesitated. Nothing important. She nodded slowly, lips pressing into a thin line. Be careful with Hannah, she said softly. Why? She likes games, and she's very good at pretending. The words sat in my chest like a stone all day. That night, I got home late. Claire was already in bed, reading. She closed the book when I came in and patted the bed beside her. I changed, brushed my teeth, and slid under the covers. She kissed me. Slow. Familiar. But something was different again. Her mouth moved in a pattern I couldn't place, like she was mimicking an old memory instead of creating a new one. After a moment, I pulled back, studying her face. She looked just like Claire. She smelled like Claire. But deep in her eyes, something flickered. A little too playful, a little too watchful. Say something only Claire would say, I said suddenly, half joking. She laughed. What? Humor me. She looked at me with mock suspicion. Okay, you forgot to take the trash out again, and I swear to God, if raccoons get into it one more time, I'm going to start leaving it on your side of the bed. I laughed, tension breaking. It was something Claire had said before, more than once. But still, as she snuggled against me and I reached for the lamp, I couldn't shake the chill down my spine. Because I couldn't be sure. Not really. And that doubt was growing louder by the day. I started keeping a journal. Not a proper one. Not the kind filled with introspection or poetic ramblings. Just quick notes jotted down in the Notes app on my phone. A date, a small observation, a shift in tone, a moment that didn't quite fit. At first, it felt ridiculous. But there was something oddly calming about turning confusion into words. It gave structure to the uncertainty. March 3rd. Claire said she went to the gym, came home smelling like red wine. That was the first real entry. She'd walked in with flushed cheeks, hair damp from what she claimed was a hot shower at the club. I kissed her hello, automatically, and was hit by the distinct scent of Pinot Noir. Not fruity or faint. Fresh, like she'd just set down a glass moments before entering. Busy day? I asked. Ugh, she said, kicking off her sneakers. Insane. Could barely find a treadmill. I nodded, watching her move to the fridge and pour water like nothing was off. I wanted to press her, but something about the way she avoided eye contact made me hesitate. March 5th, scar gone. Claire had a small scar on the inside of her left wrist. Barely noticeable, but I'd seen it 1,000 times. She once told me she got it as a kid, fell off a bike, and skidded on gravel. It was hers, like a signature. But that night, as we lay on the couch watching a movie, her hand in mine, I noticed it was gone. Just gone. I flipped her wrist subtly, pretending to trace a circle with my thumb, and found nothing but smooth skin. I didn't say anything. I just lay there, staring at the screen, not watching a single frame. March 8th, the scar is back. 3 days later, it reappeared like it had never left. That was the moment I knew something was very, very wrong. I tried to come up with rational explanations. Lighting, maybe. Or maybe I'd confused her right wrist with her left. But even as I wrote that theory down, I didn't believe it. I knew that wrist. I'd kissed that scar once, a long time ago, after one of our worst fights. It was there. Then it wasn't. Then it was again. March 10th, energy changes. One night, she came to bed wild. Playful. Her hands greedy, her mouth fast and hot, like she was trying to devour me. She bit my neck and whispered filthy things I hadn't heard from her in years. When she came, she cried out with her whole body, unrestrained, shaking. The next night, she barely touched me. She rolled to the far side of the bed, mumbled something about a migraine, and fell asleep with her back to me. I stared at the ceiling for hours, asking myself one silent question. Who was I with last night? I found myself watching Hannah more closely. She and Claire still spent nearly every hour together, constantly flitting from one shared activity to another. Antiquing, yoga, brunch, art galleries. They were closer than I'd ever seen them, their laughs too perfectly in sync, like an echo chasing itself around the room. But sometimes I'd walk in and both would fall silent. Not in a guilty way, in a composed way, like actors coming off script. The worst part? I started second-guessing everything, even my own instincts. One afternoon, I watched Claire from the kitchen doorway. She stood barefoot at the sink, washing fruit. Her hips swayed slightly to music playing from her phone. Nothing suspicious, not really. But the way she hummed, soft and tuneless, felt off. Claire never hummed. Hannah did. So I walked over, slid my hands around her waist from behind. She flinched. Only for a moment, but enough. I leaned in close, lips brushing her ear. What song is that? She hesitated. Just something random. Spotify playlist. Sounds familiar. She tilted her head, forcing a smile. Probably just reminds you of something. Probably, I echoed. But it didn't. Not even a little. That night, I tested her again. As we were getting ready for bed, I said, "Hey, remember the place we went to on our second anniversary? That little cabin in Vermont." She paused at the dresser. Of course. What was the name of the town again? She didn't turn around. Middlebury. Was it? Yeah. She looked at me then, eyes too wide. Why? I stared at her. It was Stowe. Oh, right. I get them confused sometimes. But Claire never got them confused. That trip was one of her favorites. She still had the snow globe on her shelf in the office. I waited for her to say more, to laugh it off, but she just climbed into bed and pulled the covers up. And that's when I knew. It wasn't just a hunch anymore. It wasn't a bad dream or paranoia. There was a pattern, a deliberate shift, an orchestration behind the veil of routine. And I was going to find out exactly what was going on. Because if I'd slept with someone pretending to be my wife, even once, I needed to know. And if it had happened more than once, then everything I believed about my marriage was already gone. I needed proof. Not instinct. Not suspicion. Not the gut feeling that had been gnawing at me for weeks. I needed something concrete. Something undeniable. Because the truth, whatever it was, had started to bleed into everything. My focus at work had tanked. I stopped sleeping through the night. Even my dreams felt like puzzles I couldn't solve. So I came up with a plan. Simple, subtle, undetectable. I waited until Claire was asleep. It was just past midnight. I lay beside her, listening to the gentle rhythm of her breath, watching the slow rise and fall of her back under the blanket. Her dark blonde hair was tied in a loose bun. The room was lit only by the faint glow of the street lamp outside our window. Still, I moved carefully. I slid out of bed and padded silently to my desk. I opened the drawer where I kept old receipts, batteries, junk, and a black Sharpie. I tested it on the corner of a Post-it to make sure it wasn't dried out. Then I returned to the bed. Her robe had slipped off the chair, revealing a small portion of her back. I pulled the blanket down gently, just enough to expose her shoulder blades. She stirred once, but didn't wake. I held my breath as I uncapped the marker. And then, with a hand steady from years of drafting lines and fixing detail work, I drew a small, perfect black dot at the top of her spine, right between her shoulder blades, where she couldn't possibly see it. A single dot, no more than a few millimeters wide. If this was Claire, it would still be there tomorrow. If not, I capped the marker, placed it back in the drawer, and climbed into bed. And waited. The next morning, she stirred before I did. By the time I reached for her, the other half of the bed was empty and still warm. I walked to the bathroom and peeked in. She was brushing her teeth, her back to me. She wore a camisole. The dot was there, right where I had left it. I exhaled slowly, heart pounding louder than it had any right to. She glanced over her shoulder at me, her mouth full of foam. "Morning," she mumbled. I nodded, kissed her on the temple, and left the room. For the next few days, I checked. Every morning, every night, when she undressed, when she showered, the dot remained. Until Wednesday. Wednesday changed everything. She came into the kitchen around 8 p.m., wearing a cropped hoodie and yoga pants. She leaned over the counter to grab her phone, her back momentarily exposed. No, duh. It was gone. I stared, frozen in place, my heart slamming against my ribs. She didn't notice. She was already tapping away on her screen, laughing softly at something. Her hair was styled differently, more volume, a curl at the bottom, and she wore perfume. Not Claire's usual scent, but something richer, muskier, the kind Hannah wore. I poured myself a glass of water with trembling hands. The air around me felt thin. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said too quickly. "Just tired." She moved around the island and wrapped her arms around my waist. You've been working so hard lately, she murmured. You need a break. I kissed her lightly on the forehead, and as she pulled away, I stared at her face. The eyes were the same, the nose, the lips, but the smile? Too wide, too self-aware. Hey, I said casually. I read something weird online today. Oh, apparently some twins, identical ones, can trick facial recognition software. She laughed. That's creepy. Right? Even their voice patterns can be almost indistinguishable. Well, Hannah and I are freakishly alike. Could you switch places and no one would know? She blinked. You tell me. My stomach twisted. I wasn't sure if it was flirtation or a challenge. Later that night, I decided to push it one step further. I waited until we were curled up on the couch, a movie playing half ignored in the background, and then casually mentioned it. You remember that little mark on your back? I asked. She shifted slightly. What mark? I looked at her. That tiny mole. Between your shoulders. Oh, right. She gave a vague nod. It's always been there. I stared at her for a beat. No, it hasn't. She froze, eyes flicking to mine. What? It was there this week. But now it's gone. Her expression didn't change. Not visibly. But something about her posture stiffened. Her spine straightened almost imperceptibly. Must have rubbed off, she said, then laughed. Or maybe I'm turning into a chameleon. You sure you're Claire? I said it lightly, playfully, as if it were a joke. She leaned closer, straddled me on the couch, her hands on my chest. If I weren't, would you even care? Her lips hovered near mine, her breath warm and slow. My hands instinctively slid around her hips. But I didn't kiss her, because suddenly, I didn't want to, because I didn't know who she was, and because the woman in front of me had just failed the test. She didn't flinch when I said it. I know you're not Claire. There was a pause, a breathless, suspended silence, as if the very air in the room waited for her response. She was straddling me on the couch, hips still lightly pressing against mine, her hands planted on my chest. Her face didn't betray panic, but the way her fingers twitched told me she'd heard every word. I'm sorry, she said, feigning confusion. I sat still, calm. My heart was racing, but my voice was steady. You heard me. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She blinked once, and when she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. What are you talking about? The scar on Claire's wrist, I said. The one she got as a kid when she fell off her bike. You didn't have it last week. Then it showed up again. Then it disappeared. She looked away, exhaling through her nose. And the dot, I added. The black dot I put on her back while she was sleeping. You wore it for 4 days, then suddenly, it was gone. I asked you about it. You didn't even know what I was talking about. I leaned forward, and she sat back instinctively. You've been switching places. You and Claire. You've been taking turns playing wife. She was silent. Then, finally, she stood up. Her eyes shimmered with something between panic and resolve. She crossed her arms and looked away. Not with fear. With guilt. How long have you known? She asked softly. I started to suspect weeks ago, I said. But last night confirmed it. She swallowed hard, jaw tight. Did Claire know you were testing her? I stood too. We faced each other across the living room, the TV behind us still playing some forgotten scene neither of us was watching. I don't know what Claire knows anymore, I said. I don't know who I've been kissing. I don't even know who I've been sleeping with. A long silence stretched between us, and then Hannah exhaled, eyes closing, like she was deflating. It started as a joke, she said. The day after I got back from Europe, Claire and I used to do it as kids, switch places. You know that. Harmless things. Confused teachers. Fool boyfriends. Get out of things. She smiled, but it was thin. Hollow. We were always good at it. But this time, Claire had a client meeting and wanted to duck out early. I offered to take her place at a wine tasting. No big deal. She walked toward the window, voice distant. We swapped outfits, swapped jewelry, did the hair and makeup. I went. She stayed home. Easy. She turned to look at me again. But then we did it again. And again. At first, it was just little things. Errands. A brunch here, a shopping trip there. But somewhere along the way, it turned into whole days. Whole nights. My chest tightened. Nights. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I rubbed my jaw, ball rising in my throat. So, I've had sex with both of you. Her eyes glistened. You didn't know? You weren't supposed to know. I laughed, cold and bitter. Oh, that makes it better. Hannah stepped forward. Please, don't make this worse then. No. I cut in, my voice sharp now. You don't get to say that. You don't get to decide what's worse. You climbed into my bed, pretended to be my wife, lied to my face. And for what? A thrill? Some twisted nostalgia trip? Her lips parted, but I didn't let her speak. Do you know what it feels like to look at the woman you love and not recognize her anymore? To wonder if you're losing your mind? I thought I was going crazy. And the whole time, you were playing dress up with my fucking life. She flinched at the venom in my voice. I never meant for it to go that far, she whispered. But it did. Hannah wiped at her face quickly. You think this was easy for me? You think I just did this on a whim? No. I think you did it because you could. Because you knew you'd get away with it. I walked past her, needing space. My hands were shaking. And then she said something that stopped me cold. Claire knew. I froze. She allowed it, Hannah said, her voice trembling now. At first, it was her idea. She said it would be fun, that you wouldn't notice, that it would be our little secret. I turned slowly. Claire told you to sleep with me? No, not at first. That wasn't the plan. But after the first time, she didn't stop it. My breath caught. The first time, I asked, my voice hoarse. Hannah nodded, tears now spilling freely. It was supposed to be just a kiss. Just flirtation. But then you kissed me back. And it kept going. I felt dizzy. Like the floor had tilted and nothing was where it should be anymore. And she was okay with that? Hannah nodded again. She said, if you didn't know, then it didn't count. That we were sharing a life. That love isn't about rules, it's about trust. I sank onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. My marriage, the foundation I'd built my entire adult life on, was a stage. A performance. A shared role between two women who looked exactly alike, but weren't the same at all. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Hannah hesitated, then stepped closer. Because you were right, she said. You knew. You saw through it. And I couldn't keep lying to you. Not after last night. I looked up at her. Her face, so much like Claire's, was streaked with tears. I love you, she whispered. I think I've always loved you. And in that moment, I realized the truth wasn't a crack in the wall. It was a flood, and everything I thought was solid was already drowning. The next morning, they were both waiting for me. I came downstairs expecting silence, maybe an empty kitchen and the faint echo of last night's confrontation still buzzing in the walls. Instead, Claire and Hannah sat side by side at the dining table, two steaming mugs in front of them, both still in pajamas, neither saying a word. The air felt heavy. Electric. Claire was the first to speak. Sit down. I didn't. I leaned against the counter instead, arms crossed, pulse hammering beneath the skin. Hannah looked pale, eyes puffy from crying. Claire looked composed. Too composed. How long? I asked. Claire blinked slowly. Since the week Hannah got back. And before that? Claire hesitated. We hadn't done it since high school. I scoffed, sharp and bitter. So you thought it'd be fun to resurrect your childhood party trick inside my marriage? Claire flinched. Hannah bowed her head. No, Claire said. It didn't start that way. I didn't say anything. I just waited. Claire took a deep breath, her fingers knotting in her lap. You were distant. Cold, even. The last few months before Hannah came back, we were off. You think that justifies this? No, she said. But it explains it. You were pulling away, I was trying to get your attention, and then Hannah was just there. We slipped into old rhythms. She offered to help. First with errands, then work events. Claire's voice cracked. You didn't notice. That made it easier. I stared at her. You wanted to see if I'd notice? Claire didn't answer. Hannah spoke up instead. She didn't think it would go as far as it did. But you did, I said, my gaze locking onto hers. She didn't deny it. I asked you a simple question last night, I said, and you didn't lie. That's why I'm still standing here. But don't mistake that for forgiveness. Claire wiped a hand over her face. We need to tell you everything. I think I've heard enough. You haven't, she said. Not yet. She looked at Hannah, then back at me. When we were kids, we'd switch for fun. But somewhere along the way, it became more. We'd cover for each other. Lie for each other. Live as each other when we wanted a break. And when we couldn't stop, Hannah picked up the thread. We started sharing things. Secrets. Clothes. Boyfriends. My jaw clenched. Claire pressed on. It stopped for years. But when Hannah came back, something in me, us, slipped again. I was burnt out, frustrated. She offered to help, and I said yes. I thought it'd be harmless. You'd never even notice. But I did. Claire nodded. I didn't want it to go further. I told her not to sleep with you. But I didn't listen, Hannah said softly. And you didn't stop her, I snapped. Claire's eyes welled. Because I was afraid. Of what? Of the truth, she whispered. That maybe you'd respond to her more than me. That maybe she'd give you something I'd lost. I turned away, gripping the counter until my knuckles ached. So you decided to run a marriage experiment? See how far you could push the deception before I broke. No. Claire stood. It wasn't like that. I spun around. Then what was it, Claire? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you invited your sister into our bed and handed her your life. The room fell silent. Hannah wiped her eyes. I didn't mean to fall for you. I laughed bitterly. Well, I guess that makes everything better. I'm not excusing it, she said. I just want you to know it wasn't just sex. It wasn't a prank. I felt something real. Claire looked like she'd been punched in the gut, but she didn't deny it. She told me. Claire said. After it happened. And you didn't end it? Claire shook her head. Because by then, I didn't know how. I felt like I was falling through the floor. How many times? I asked, dreading the answer. Claire looked away. I don't know. 3, maybe 4, Hannah whispered. Full nights. I had to sit down. I dropped into the chair opposite them, trying to breathe. You've both been acting like you own my perception, I said. Like my love is a game you can pass back and forth. We never meant to hurt you, Claire whispered. Then what did you mean to do? No one answered. The silence spoke volumes. Finally, Claire reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. I didn't pull away. I was too numb. I still love you, she said. I met her eyes. Then why didn't you protect us? She started crying, the kind of cry that comes from the gut, the kind I'd only seen a few times in our marriage. It didn't move me the way it used to. I looked at Hannah, whose eyes were locked on me like she was bracing for a final blow. I shook my head slowly. You took something sacred, something only meant for 2 people, and you made it a show, a performance. I don't know how to come back from that. They didn't try to stop me when I stood. They didn't say a word when I walked upstairs and packed a bag, and they didn't follow me out the door. Because for the first time, I think they understood. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was the end of trust, and maybe the beginning of something none of us were ready to face. I didn't drive far. I didn't need to. I ended up at a cheap motel 5 miles outside of town, the kind where the AC rattled louder than the TV and the walls smelled like stale smoke and Lysol. I dropped my bag on the floor and collapsed onto the mattress, fully clothed, the weight of it all pressing into my chest like a boulder I couldn't move. I didn't cry. Not yet. I was too angry, too filled with something sharp and acidic that made even breathing feel like betrayal. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Their matching faces. Their matching voices. Their matching lies. I had shared a life with Claire. A real one. Built from late-night fights, lazy Sunday mornings, whispered promises in the dark. I'd loved her with a kind of steadiness that didn't need sparks to be true. And she'd taken that love, that trust, and passed it between them like a fucking party trick. For months. And I hadn't even known. It wasn't just the sex. It was the manipulation. The violation of something sacred. I sat up, grabbed the remote, and turned the TV on just to drown out the silence. But nothing could distract me from the loop playing in my head. Who had I touched? Who had I kissed? Who had cried out my name in the dark? Was it ever Claire? Or had I been making love to a ghost wearing her face? The rage came suddenly. Not explosive, cold. Controlled. The kind that makes your hands steady even when your blood is boiling. I needed answers. Not confessions. Details. I wanted to know everything. Which nights? Which mornings? Which conversations were real and which were stolen? I deserved that much. So the next evening, I went back. Not because I forgave them. Because I needed to watch them squirm. They were in the living room when I walked in. Claire stood up the second she saw me. Hannah didn't move. I didn't sit. I just stood there and said, I want it all. Claire blinked. What? I want the details. All of them. I want to know when it started. Who initiated what? What nights you switched? Which lies you told? Which mornings I woke up beside someone who wasn't my wife? They exchanged a look. Don't look at each other. I snapped. Look at me. Claire nodded, lips trembling. Okay. It came in fragments. Halting. Hesitant. The first switch had been the wine tasting. Then a charity dinner. Then one night, when Claire had a migraine and asked Hannah to fill in at a work happy hour, she said it would just be for a couple of hours, Hannah murmured. But afterward, you texted her, asked if she wanted to get dessert. I frowned. I remember that. We went to that bakery on 5th. She nodded. That was me. My stomach turned. She watched me flirt with her sister and said nothing. Claire stared at the floor. I didn't know until afterward. She told me when she got home. I was shocked. And then you let it continue. Claire's voice cracked. I didn't know how to stop it. You were happier. You were smiling again. I paced the room, hands on my hips. So what? You gift-wrapped me to your twin like I was a pet project? A science experiment? No, Claire said quickly. It wasn't like that. Hannah's voice was softer. It was already happening by the time I realized I was falling for you. I turned to her. Did you even hesitate? Did either of you stop to think about what this would do to me? Hannah's eyes filled. I told her we should stop. Claire nodded. I told her the same. But neither of you did. They didn't answer. My voice rose. You let me make love to someone who wasn't my wife. You let me spill every private thought into the ears of someone pretending to be Claire. You let me believe in something that wasn't real. Claire stepped toward me, tears falling freely. It was real. No, I spat. It was a play, a costume party. You were actors reading each other's lines. Hannah stood now too, trembling. I'm sorry. Sorry. I laughed bitterly. You think sorry covers this? I turned back to Claire. How many nights did you watch her go upstairs to our bedroom, knowing she was about to lie down in our bed, with me, and you said nothing? She covered her mouth and wept. I didn't comfort her. She didn't deserve comfort. I sat down, finally, only because my knees threatened to give out. When was the last time I actually slept with you? I asked. Claire looked at me, hollow. About 3 weeks ago. And the time before that. She didn't answer. Answer me. She whispered, 2 months before that. I let that sink in. So almost every night since January, I've been with Hannah. No one said anything. My voice dropped. Do you know how sick that is? Hannah whispered, I loved you. I snapped my head toward her. No, you stole me. That's not love. That's obsession. That's possession. You didn't love me. You loved what wasn't yours. Claire stepped in front of her sister protectively, like I was the threat. Like they weren't the ones who destroyed me. I want you both out of this house, I said. Claire's eyes widened. What? You heard me. I want space. I want time. I want this house to feel like mine again. You can't just. I stood, towering now. You gave me up the moment you let someone else wear your skin. Claire staggered back. I left them standing there and went straight upstairs. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell anymore. I just locked it behind me. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I cried. Not for them. Not for what they'd done. But for myself. For the man who loved someone so much, he never saw her disappearing right in front of his eyes. The house felt hollow after they left. Claire packed a duffel bag the next morning. Hannah followed her out like a shadow, barely looking at me as they stepped into the car. No dramatic scenes. No last-minute tears. Just the click of the front door and the low rumble of an engine starting. They didn't tell me where they were going. I didn't ask. For the first few days, I wandered the house like a ghost. I avoided our bedroom. Slept on the couch. Made black coffee I barely drank. I'd open drawers and find her bracelets tangled together, or a receipt from a dinner I no longer trusted actually happened with Claire. It was like living in a stranger's life. Every room felt staged, like a movie set where I was the only actor who didn't know the script had changed. I told no one. Not friends, not family. I wasn't ready to say the words out loud. I didn't know how to explain it. My wife and her identical twin took turns being her, and I didn't notice. I'd sound like a lunatic, but the truth had carved itself into my bones. And it wasn't done with me yet. Because the worst part, the truly sickening part, wasn't the betrayal. It was the realization that a part of me missed Hannah. I hated it. I hated that I had to question who I'd felt that spark with in the kitchen, who had made that dirty joke in the car, who had licked the frosting off her finger and then kissed me like it meant more than dessert. I hated that I liked it, that I still remembered her laugh, her heat, that somewhere in all the confusion, some part of me had started to want her, too. I needed space and clarity, so I did what I hadn't done in years. I called my brother. Damn, he said after I finished telling him. Only the surface details, no need to get into the bed swapping just yet. That's some Lifetime movie shit. Tell me about it. He whistled. And you didn't know? At all. I noticed things, I admitted. But I told myself I was being paranoid. You weren't. No. There was a pause. So what now? I don't know. But I couldn't sit still. So I went through old photos on my phone. Tried to pinpoint expressions. Times I thought I was with Claire, but maybe wasn't. I didn't get answers. But I got questions. Too many. I clicked on a picture from a New Year's party. Claire, or maybe Hannah, smiling in a gold dress, her hand resting on my chest, eyes locked on mine. That night had ended in the back seat of our car, fogged windows, clothes pushed aside in a frenzy of lust. I remembered every sound, every moan, and suddenly, I wasn't sure who had made them. That was when the rot really set in. Because if Hannah had played the role so well that I couldn't tell, who else had she fooled? It was just a passing thought at first. A shadow, but it grew teeth. Hannah was bold, restless, charismatic in a way that turned heads. I'd always known that. Claire used to joke that Hannah left a trail of broken hearts like cigarette butts wherever she went. And she'd dated plenty. I started wondering, were they just dates? The memory hit me like a punch to the chest. 3 months ago, I'd gotten home early from a work trip. Claire wasn't expecting me until the next day. But when I opened the door, she came down the stairs looking flushed, hair damp from a shower, wearing lingerie she hadn't worn for me in years. Surprise, she'd said. We'd had sex in the hallway. Fast. Desperate. She'd pulled me into her with this fierce hunger that hadn't felt like Claire's usual rhythm. At the time, I chalked it up to missing me. But now I wasn't sure that had been Claire at all. And the voice in my head whispered something I couldn't ignore. What if that night, you weren't the only man she'd been with? I checked the laundry hamper. I remembered what she'd worn, red lace. It hadn't been there the next morning, which meant it had already been washed. My gut twisted. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to entertain the idea that she'd slept with someone else, then slid into my arms with the same body, same perfume, same lips. But I couldn't ignore the way Hannah moved through the world like consequences didn't apply to her. I opened Instagram, scrolled through Hannah's photos. There were men, always blurred in the background, a hand on her waist, a shadow behind her in a window reflection. Never tagged, never named. But I counted 4 different men in 4 different cities over 5 months. I clicked on one photo, a rooftop bar in Lisbon. Her head thrown back, laughing, a whiskey glass in her hand. A tall man beside her, face cropped. I zoomed in. He wore a ring. Same hand I saw on her lower back in a mirror behind them. She was seeing married men, or at least one. I closed the app and stared at the wall. Hannah had spent years stepping in and out of lives like shoes she could try on for a season. And when she came home, Claire welcomed her with open arms, and eventually, open sheets. I'd become one of Hannah's favorite outfits. Comfortable, familiar, disposable. The bile rose in my throat, but I swallowed it. Because part of me still needed to know. If she'd been with someone else during that time, while pretending to be Claire, then I hadn't just been betrayed. I'd been shared, unknowingly, with strangers. I picked up my phone, typed a message to Claire. We need to talk. No lies. I need the whole truth. Every night. Every detail. And if Hannah was with anyone else while she was pretending to be you, I want to know. All of it. I hit send, then stared at the screen, waiting for a reply that could either give me closure or break me completely. Claire responded an hour later. Come tomorrow. Both of us will be here. No more lies. We owe you everything. I read the message 5 times. Then I stared at it for another 20 minutes, wondering if showing up would make me a fool or a man finally taking control of the narrative. Truth be told, I didn't know what I was expecting. An apology? Clarity? Closure? Maybe I just wanted them to say it to my face, that the life I thought I had never truly belonged to me. I drove over late afternoon the next day, my stomach coiled in knots, the house looking exactly as it always had. Neat lawn, clean porch, wind chimes gently ringing in the breeze. Too perfect, too quiet. But nothing inside that house was clean anymore. Claire opened the door. Hannah stood behind her. The two of them side by side still made me do a double take, even now. They both wore neutral expressions, but I could see it, how tired they looked. Hollow, like this had eaten at them too. I stepped inside without speaking. We sat at the dining table. Claire across from me, Hannah diagonal. The same spot where all of this had begun to unravel. Claire spoke first. You deserve to know everything. I didn't nod, didn't respond, just waited. So she told me. About the switches. The first time. The second. How at first it was innocent. An errand, a dinner, a night when Claire didn't feel like going out. But then came the slip. The night I kissed Hannah, not knowing. And she kissed me back. That was the crack that became a canyon. It wasn't supposed to happen, Claire said. But I saw how you lit up around her. I hadn't seen you laugh like that in months. So you let her become you. Claire flinched. I didn't think it would go that far. Hannah's voice was low. But I did. I wanted it to. She looked me in the eyes. There was no seduction this time, no mystery. Just a woman laid bare. I told myself it was temporary, that it was just fantasy. But then it became something else. You fell in love with my life. I fell in love with you. Her voice cracked. But yeah, maybe the life, too. I turned to Claire. And you were just okay with all of this? She rubbed her arms, as if cold. I wasn't okay. I was scared. You'd started to drift. I thought, if Hannah gave you something I couldn't, maybe we'd all come out better. That's insane. I know that now. I paused. Let that sit. Was she ever with anyone else? I asked. While she was pretending to be you? Claire hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. I turned to Hannah. She didn't look away. There was one night, she said. In November. You were out of town. Claire was visiting her mom. I went out. I wore her perfume. Her necklace. I swallowed hard. I met a guy at a hotel bar. We drank. He thought I was Claire. I didn't correct him. Claire's eyes welled. I didn't know until afterward. I stood, unable to stay seated. I paced, pressing my palms to my eyes. So he thought he slept with my wife. Hannah didn't speak. And then you let me come home and kiss you. Make love to you. You let me touch a body I thought was only mine. Claire whispered, we were lost. No. I snapped. You were selfish. Reckless. You broke every part of me that trusted either of you. Hannah stood slowly. I won't defend it. But I need you to understand something. I looked at her, jaw clenched. You always belonged to both of us. Even if you didn't know it. Since the beginning. Since before you married Claire. I froze. What the hell does that mean? Claire wiped a tear. When I first introduced you to Hannah, she pulled me aside after you left. She said, if you don't marry him, I will. I stared at her. I thought she was joking, Claire said. But she wasn't. Hannah stepped forward. I loved you then. I loved you when I watched you marry her. I've never stopped. My heart pounded. Loud. Violent. You're saying this like it's romantic, I hissed. It's not. It's deranged. I know how it sounds, Hannah said. But it's the truth. Claire looked up at me with eyes that had once meant home. We didn't plan it, she said. But when we saw how seamless it was, how naturally we could share you, we started to wonder if it had always been inevitable. Inevitable? I repeated, stunned. We're two halves, Hannah said. And maybe you were always meant to love both. I laughed bitterly. This isn't a love triangle. It's psychological warfare. We're not trying to justify it, Claire said. But we are trying to be honest. I sat back down dizzy. So what do you want now? A throuple? A shared husband arrangement? You take Mondays and Wednesdays. She takes weekends? They didn't answer. Because the silence was the answer. They had already talked about it. I stood again, slower this time. I married one woman, I said. I loved one face, one laugh, one heart. And now I have to accept that it was never just her. That I was a puzzle the two of you solved together. Claire whispered, but you loved us both. Maybe, I said, but I didn't know I did. I wasn't given the choice. And that was the truth, finally said aloud. They didn't trick me into love. They stole my choice. They collapsed two identities into one and handed her to me with a smile, knowing damn well she was never just one woman. You didn't just betray me, I said. You rewrote my entire past. Neither of them spoke. They couldn't, because there was nothing left to say. Only one chapter remained. The choice. Mine. I didn't make the decision that night. I walked out without a word, leaving both of them at the table, staring at the spot I'd just occupied. No shouting. No slamming of doors. Just silence, thick and final. I drove with no destination. Past the old coffee shop where Claire and I used to sit on Sunday mornings. Past the bookstore where I once bumped into Hannah, pre-Europe, where she'd smiled and said, funny how we always seem to find each other. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of the lake, parked near the dock, and stepped into the cold October air. The water looked black under the fading sky. I stood at the edge and stared. Two faces. One life. One love, or was it two? That was the question I couldn't shake. Because even now, after everything. I didn't feel only anger. I felt loss. But of what? A lie? A fantasy? Or the two people who had made me feel more seen, more wanted, than anyone else ever had? Claire had been the safe harbor, the steady hand, the partner I could count on. But in the last year, something had shifted, some spark had gone dull. And instead of fighting to reignite it, she'd handed the flame to someone else. And Hannah? She'd been the fire I didn't see coming. The energy, the seduction. But she didn't just seduce my body. She knew what to say, when to say it. She knew me, in ways I hadn't realized, in ways that sometimes scared me. Was it possible, even now, that I still wanted them both? Did I love Claire? Yes. Did I love Hannah? Yes. And that scared the hell out of me. Because I'd always believed love was a choice. A singular one. That you gave your heart to one person, and that person gave it back, and that was it. But what if it wasn't? What if love didn't care about symmetry or convention? What if it was messier, stranger, more human? I drove home the next morning. They were still there, sitting on the porch this time, as if waiting for a verdict. Claire stood first, then Hannah, the same rhythm they always moved in. A mirror and its reflection. I stopped a few feet away. I'm not divorcing you, I said. Claire inhaled sharply. You're not. I shook my head. But I'm not pretending this didn't destroy something either. They were both silent. I looked at Hannah. And I'm not banishing you. Her brows lifted. You're not. No. I looked down, hands in my pockets. I've been thinking about the nights I laughed and felt alive and touched someone who knew me better than I knew myself. And the worst part is, I don't know if that was Claire or you. Maybe it was both. I looked back up, but I'm done being blind to it. Claire stepped closer. So what are you saying? I'm saying I need honesty. If there's a future for any of us, it starts with one rule: no more pretending. No more switching. No more masks. Hannah's voice was barely above a whisper. So you'd want both of us? I exhaled. I don't know what I want yet, but I know what I don't want. I don't want to walk away from something that, against all odds, still feels real. Claire's eyes were glassy. You're serious. I'm serious. I stepped toward them. You broke something. Both of you. And I can't fix it alone. But if you're both willing to rebuild, not as a trick or some twisted triangle, but as a truth, we start from there. The wind blew through the porch, lifting Hannah's hair. She looked at Claire, and Claire looked back. Then they both nodded. We didn't kiss. No grand reunion. No dramatic embrace. Just a mutual step forward. A breath. An understanding. That night, we sat on the couch, the three of us. Not touching, not plotting, just talking. Claire told stories I hadn't heard in years. Hannah made us laugh so hard I nearly forgot everything. Nearly, but not quite. Because healing would take time. And trust even more. But for the first time since the deception began, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Choice. I had it again. And this time, I chose to stay. Not because it was easy. Not because it made sense. But because love, as I'd learned, isn't always clean. Sometimes, it's two sisters who share more than blood. Sometimes, it's a man who loves them both in different ways. Sometimes, it's a shattered life made whole again by the most unexpected, impossible bond. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough.